Imagine the coldest night of your life, the kind where your breath turns into little white clouds, your toes go numb before you even reach the door, and the wind cuts through you like a knife. Now picture running out of firewood on a night like that. No cozy fireplace, no electric heater, not even a fleece blanket to wrap yourself in. Just you, the freezing dark, and the sound of snow piling up outside. Sounds like a nightmare, right? But for the Vikings, this wasn't a nightmare. It was Tuesday. Night after night, they faced blizzards that could freeze a man solid, and yet they survived. So how on earth did they make it through? The answer might surprise you. It wasn't just fire that kept them alive. It was something much smarter. The Vikings didn't just deal with chilly nights. We're talking about brutal winters where the mercury dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius, winds howled like angry wolves, and snow buried entire villages overnight. No central heating, no fleece pajamas, no button you could press to crank up the thermostat. Just raw nature and human beings caught in the middle of it. And here's the thing, firewood wasn't always an option. It sounds strange, right? But in the far north, trees were scarce and winters were long. If they had relied only on burning logs, they wouldn't have lasted very long. So instead, they turned survival into an art form. They engineered homes like medieval insulation chambers. They slept with animals like living space heaters. They layered clothes the way modern hikers layer jackets. Every trick was clever, unexpected, and born from sheer necessity. And believe me, some of these survival hacks are wilder than you think. When we think about staying warm, we think fire. A big blazing fireplace, maybe a pile of blankets. But for the Vikings, their secret heater had 4 legs and hooves. That's right, they slept with their animals. Chickens, goats, sheep, even cows, all under the same roof. It sounds wild, but it worked like a charm. Picture this, a Viking longhouse wasn't divided like our modern homes. It was one massive hall, a fire pit glowing in the middle, sleeping benches along the walls, and right there beside the family, the livestock. And this wasn't random. The animals weren't just visiting. They were part of the survival plan. You see, a single cow can give off as much heat as a 1,000-watt space heater. Sheep were like walking wool blankets radiating warmth all night long. Even horses sometimes slept near the door, not only for heat, but also as an early alarm system if wolves or raiders came too close. Clever, right? And the design made it even smarter. Animal stalls were built slightly lower than the living space, so the heat from their bodies would rise up and fill the room, while cold drafts stayed trapped at floor level. Basically, the Vikings turned their homes into natural furnaces powered by biology. Strange, maybe, but in a world where firewood was scarce and blizzards never quit, this was genius. And trust me, this is just the beginning. Their next survival trick might surprise you even more. Now, let's talk about the Viking home itself. At first glance, a longhouse might look simple, just timber walls and a roof of grass. But step closer and you realize it was a survival machine engineered layer by layer. The walls weren't bare planks. They were 3 layers thick wooden boards on the inside, a heavy middle of packed earth, and another board layer outside. Think of it as medieval insulation foam, the Viking version of bubble wrap. Dense, breathable, and brilliant at holding heat. The roof told the same story. It wasn't just thatched. It was covered in sod, sometimes up to 2 feet thick. In winter, it worked like a giant wool blanket. In spring, it even sprouted grass, camouflaging the house into the hillside. Nature's own insulation free of charge. And don't forget the floor. Cold air sinks right. Vikings fought back with layers of straw, animal hides, even birch bark. These created a barrier between frozen earth and bare feet. Some houses were even sunk partly into the ground, using the earth itself as a natural thermal battery, cool in summer, warm in winter. Smart, isn't it? So while snowstorms howled outside, inside a Viking home could stay around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Not cozy by our standards, but warm enough to keep families alive through endless blizzards. And that's just one piece of their survival puzzle. Their tricks with fire might surprise you even more. When you think of Vikings, you probably imagine huge bonfires blazing through the night. But here's the twist: they didn't want roaring flames. What they needed was steady heat, not fireworks. Most Viking longhouses didn't even have chimneys. Not because they didn't know how, but because they understood exactly what a chimney would do: suck all the warm air out. Instead, smoke drifted slowly through a small hole in the roof, while the fire in the center smoldered low and constant. It wasn't dramatic, but it was efficient. The air stayed warm, the beams above were smoked and preserved, and insects didn't stand a chance. And here's my favorite part. At night, they'd pull glowing stones out of the fire, wrap them in fur or sheepskin, and tuck them beneath their beds. Imagine crawling into your sleeping bench with what was basically an ancient hot water bottle, except carved straight from the earth. Heated to more than 150 degrees Fahrenheit, those stones radiated warmth for hours. Quiet, steady, safe. Some fire pits were even shaped like shallow cones, spreading heat evenly through the room. And when wood was scarce, they got creative, burning peat blocks or dried animal dung. Not glamorous, sure, but it kept the fire going all night without wasting fuel. So while the outside world froze solid inside, Vikings had mastered the art of the silent heater. Not bright flames, not wasted logs, just clever design and pure survival smarts. And the way they slept, that was another trick entirely. If you've ever camped on frozen ground, you know one thing: the floor is your enemy. Cold air sinks, stealing heat from your body faster than you can say goodnight. The Vikings knew this well, and their solution was simple but genius: sleep higher. They built wooden sleeping platforms raised above the icy floor. Not only did this keep their bodies away from the coldest layer of air, but it also brought them closer to the warm ceiling where smoke and heat gathered. Some benches were wide enough for entire families, while others were small and cozy, curtained off with animal hides. Think of them as medieval sleeping pods, trapping body heat like little cocoons. And they didn't stop there. Beneath the beds, they stacked straw, fur, even sheets of birch bark. Each layer added insulation, cutting off the chill creeping up from the earth. Nothing went to waste. Even firewood and food were sometimes stored under the beds, kept from freezing by the warmth of the people above. In some longhouses, lofts were built high along the beams, attic-like platforms that caught the very warmest air in the room. Imagine climbing into bed in the rafters, the smoky heat wrapping around you while snowstorms raged outside. To the Vikings, sleep wasn't just rest. It was strategy. Position mattered. Layers mattered. Every detail kept them one step ahead of the cold. And speaking of layers, the way they dressed for bed was another survival trick all on its own. When the sun went down and the fire burned low, the Vikings didn't crawl under a pile of blankets. They wore their blankets, layer after layer: wool tunics, fur-lined cloaks, linen undergarments, thick trousers, sheepskin hoods. Each piece trapped a pocket of warm air, like stacking insulation around the body. Modern hikers call it the onion method: layers you can peel on and off. But the Vikings were doing this 1,000 years before anyone gave it a name, and they didn't stop at clothes. For their feet, they wrapped wool socks or stuffed scraps of fabric with moss and straw, turning them into homemade thermal boots. Crude, sure. Effective, absolutely. Some cloaks were stitched from sealskin, waterproof and windproof, the Gore-Tex of its day. Wolf and bear furs added heavyweight insulation for the coldest nights. And they fastened cloaks with brooches at the shoulder, an elegant detail that wasn't just style, but survival, letting them layer quickly without gaps. Here's the key: Vikings didn't undress to sleep. They bundled up in everything they owned, transforming themselves into walking, wearable sleeping bags. Archaeologists have even found burial mounds where warriors were wrapped in layers of fur and linen, the same survival system they used in life carried into death. So while you and I might shiver in a t-shirt, under a blanket, the Vikings walked into bed already armed like human furnaces. And believe it or not, what they ate before sleep made them even warmer. Here's a survival trick you might not expect. The Vikings didn't just eat to fill their stomachs. They ate to fuel their furnaces. On winter nights, their meals were heavy, greasy, and absolutely intentional. Whale blubber, seal meat, barley porridge soaked in lard. Not exactly fine dining, but every bite was packed with fat, the most concentrated source of energy nature could offer. 1 gram of whale fat has more than twice the calories of a modern protein bar. That's not a coincidence. That's strategy. Why? Because digesting fat takes time. As the body breaks it down, it releases heat slowly like a log smoldering in a fire pit. This gave the Vikings a steady flow of warmth from the inside out hours after they'd gone to bed. Some families even saved special foods for bedtime. Hot bone broth, thick with collagen, and fat was like drinking liquid insulation. It kept the body warm through the coldest hours. And when food was scarce, they dug into their storage pits, dried fish, fermented meat, even underground caches of butter. Nothing wasted, everything optimized for warmth. So while you and I might sip hot cocoa before bed, the Vikings fueled up on fat bombs that turned their bodies into radiators. Food wasn't just survival, it was heat measured bite by bite. And here's the thing, the final source of warmth came not from animals' fire or food, but from something even closer. Here's the final secret, and maybe the warmest one of all. The Vikings didn't sleep alone. They slept together. Families, children, elders, all tucked in under heavy furs, pressed close on the same wooden platform. Why? Because the human body is like a little radiator. Each one gives off heat about the same as a 100-watt light bulb. Now multiply that by 4, 5, or even 10 bodies, packed close together. You've got what scientists today call a shared thermal mass. In plain English, more bodies meant more warmth, and sometimes that warmth made the difference between life and death. Even dogs curled up beside their owners, not as pets, but as living heaters. A Viking family dog wasn't just there to guard the door. It was a vital part of the night's survival kit, radiating heat while adding comfort. Picture it outside, the wind howls and snowstacks high against the walls. Inside, the family huddles tight, wrapped in hides stitched from wolf bear or reindeer. Above them, smoke lingers in the rafters. Below them, straw and fur cut off the frozen earth. And in the middle of it all, warmth shared and multiplied heartbeat to heartbeat. For the Vikings, sleep wasn't solitude, it was survival. And when morning came, they rose not just alive, but strong enough to build ships, chop wood, and set sail into the unknown. The Vikings didn't just survive the night by tossing logs on a fire. They outsmarted the cold. They turned animals into heaters, houses into insulation chambers, beds into pods, clothes into wearable sleeping bags, food into slow-burning fuel, and family into a shared furnace. Every choice was clever. Every detail mattered, and together it kept them alive through nights that could freeze the sea itself. But here's the thing, survival was just the beginning. The Vikings didn't endure winter only to hide away when the snow melted. When spring came, they stepped out of those smoky longhouses strong and ready. They built ships, they chopped wood, and they sailed headfirst into icy oceans chasing horizons no one else dared to reach. How did they do it? How did men without maps, without compasses, find their way across the Atlantic and stumble onto a continent the world didn't even know existed? That's another incredible story, one you won't want to miss.